Hey guys, welcome to week 16. I'm a little sad that we've met the end of the road. This is it. This is the final one for this class. And because I did this a little bit different than normal, I can actually give feedback to Dr. A during my video presentation. So that I wish I had done this way the whole time. And I'm a little sad that I didn't figure this out earlier too. Okay, so in chapter 16 of Stempel's Showtime, he highlights the rise of the revival, the anti-musical, and the fact that Broadway no longer might no longer be the heart of American theater. So some of this came out of commercialism, and the fact that everything on Broadway starts out so much more expensive than other places. It means they have to make so much more profit, which means the tickets prices are higher, which means they're selling all the merchandise that's become just such a thing now. And they're not really willing, the people who are actively a part of Broadway still are not really willing to take the risks on new pieces. I did mention that, for example, the Phantom of the Opera. It ran for almost as long as I've been alive on Broadway, successfully. They were still selling tickets, still selling out shows. They closed it down before I got to see it on Broadway, which I'm a little salty about, but that's because of choices I made in life. But now there's a revival on Broadway. And I actually remember having conversations with my friends of, I feel like maybe they're pulling it from Broadway just so they can put it back on Broadway and try to win these Tonys for revivals and get all the Tonys again. But I'm not mad about it going back, that revival happening. However, we also see those people who are the active new creators right now, which are being called the children of Sondheim. So definitely people who idolized Sondheim or had him as a mentor, creating new shows. And we see that for the majority of these composers and lyricists and writers, that their shows don't always have a happy ending. Like Rent, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, the last 5 years, falsettos. It's not boy meets girl and they live happily ever after. It can be boy meets girl or boy meets boy or girl meets, whatever combination, but sometimes they die. Sometimes the relationship just isn't successful. It's more, they're taking a deeper look, I feel, on those people who are on the outskirts, the people that they see in the mirror. The writers, the people who try and fail, the people who love and lose, the people who are on the outskirts of society. The voices are being given a voice in these. And Stempel wasn't saying that Broadway is dying in the sense that it's actually going to die and not exist in any form anymore. Like many artists and composers and writers and authors of books that we've been reading, theater's been dying since it opened. And yet it doesn't seem to disappear. It just transforms and becomes something new, which I think is very much at the core of what theater is. And I know I focused, we had I've talked about how in the previous chapter he talked about like, oh, it's like condensing, and I said, or it's separating. I said, no, it's like the whole world has become international. Everything is interlinked. It's like how the internet has made the world smaller, because all of a sudden, instead of hearing about something happening literally halfway across the world, months after it happens, weeks to months after it happens, we can find out minutes. And so the concept of how far away something is, about how different we are or distanced we are, it's not the same as it used to be. we recognize a lot more of ourselves in other people now, I think, than we used to, because of that. And I think that's also what's happened to the theater world with the mega musicals and the techno musicals. That we have, the money's there, yes, which is why they're reaching out to international, because they have to make the money back, but also because there are ideas that transcend individual cultures, and we're able to become a smaller, more tight-knit community with that. Which, talking about the social aspects, I'm going to switch over to Jones now, which was The Social. His final chapter focuses on issue-driven message musicals, which were very prevalent in the 80s and 90s. From women's issues to racial issues to highlighting gays. These were all big topics. Jones talks about falsettos and La Cage aux Follies, and how La Cage lacked the seriousness that was aimed for it. But in reading this, I'm like, no, I know this story. It's The Birdcage. Nathan Lane, Robin Williams, amazing movie that was just like, I remember thinking like, man, they pulled this off in like the 90s. Like that's impressive that this caliber of movie was done with this caliber of actors, talking about people who are on the outskirts of society. But the movie was able to keep it more serious. The movie was able to, even though portrayals were a little over the top, we saw it as it was an artistic person, and the personality was a big personality. Not that it was a caricature, but that the character was just a larger-than-life person. And I do think that the intimacy of the camera being able to get like this close on a person definitely added to that feeling more of, this is just a person, not a caricature. Whereas on stage, because you're so far away, it would be hard to keep that intimacy, and it not just look like it was an over-the-top caricature of a person. They also talked about the restaged revival of Cabaret, and that because it was so much later, from the 60s to the 80s, that the sexuality didn't have to be hinted at. It could be very open out front. And no, we don't have the Nazi party walking in right at the beginning. Hal Prince was very particular about that. There was no mistaking at the end what the point was and where we were getting to. He talked about Rent and how all of the up to now shows mentioned in the chapter were serious, while forgetting that we can have a little fun dealing with the bad. He was frustrated that American musicals had lost the ability to deal with tragedy with the comedy. Like we get Officer Krupke and West Side Story. There's a whole bunch of others, and I'm blanking on them right now. But he also, he was more hopeful, I think, than Stempel. I think Stempel was a little bit pessimistic in his outlook on the future, but Jones is very much that, hey, it's ever shifting. You know, the pendulum swings, and now hopefully we can find our way back to, it doesn't have to be serious to be good. And with that, I am going to focus on the question from Dr. A about how might the deliberate lack of seriousness in Urinetown be seen as a critique of the overtly earnest message musicals that preceded it. And he also talked about like Book of Mormon, and that's when I was reading his first question before I even read the Book of Mormon. I was like, yes, this is exactly it. And I think that part of it is because I don't know that it's a deliberate message against the earnestness of the message musicals that preceded it. I think it's actually a shift in satire, and what we're looking for when we see satire. And the thing that came to my mind is some of the earlier musicals that did do satire, and the vaudeville shows that did do satire, it was still a lot of times like vaudeville almost couldn't take itself serious enough, and to separate from that, we start getting satirical stories and message musicals that felt they had to be serious to separate and be seen as something distinct and different. And around these same times, this is when we've got the like echoes of A Modest Proposal, which again, complete satire, but very, very serious satire. Whereas today, Book of Mormon, written by the same people who did South Park, if I'm remembering my brain correctly, if my facts are correct in my brain, and the point was not to take anything too seriously, because if we take ourselves too seriously, we can't accept critique well, and we can't grow and develop well. So I don't know that it was an overt message against anything, but I think it's almost, if we look at it, it's the same thing that the Message musicals did against vaudeville. I don't know that it was an overt message or intended to be an overt message so much as creating a separation and being willing to say, hey, if we take ourselves too seriously, we're not going to learn and grow, because we're going to be so afraid to look foolish that we might not be able to admit that we've been foolish. And if we're willing to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously, maybe we can make more changes for the better. I think that's more where it came from. I think it was more that. So have a great holiday. Thanks for sticking with me this long.